Okay, this is going to be page 32 in your math journal. We're going to call it division of decimals. Okay, we're going to write a couple of things and then we're going to turn our notebook again. So first thing, I want you to put a little star here. And I want you to remember that the decimal point in the dividend, or the number that you're dividing, needs to match in the quotient in the answer. Okay, decimal place value matters. We went over division before, and you remember how important it was that you lined up your place values? Same thing here, your place values have to be lined up. That means your decimals will be lined up in the answer. Okay, second one that you need to remember is we can annex zeros. Annex means to place more. So we can annex zeros after the decimal. I want you to underline the after, that's important. If we need to continue dividing. All right, with that, let's do a couple of examples. So turn your math journal. Okay, you need room for 4 problems. Okay, the first problem I want you to have is 7.7 divided by 14. So that means 14 is going to be dividend, or I'm sorry, the divisor, and 7.7 is our dividend. All right. So I want you to think, will 14 fit into 7? Nope, so let's write a 0 there. 0 times 14 is 0, so I'm going to subtract 0 from there, which means I'm going to end up with 7 still there, and I'm going to move down to the next place value. Okay, the only difference today from what you've been doing is sometimes you might have to annex zeros, and then you have to make sure the decimal lines up in the answer. So, see how my decimals line up? The rest of this is just going to be a decimal answer, which makes sense because 14 is a larger number than 7.7, so it will not go into it any whole amounts of times. So we're going to just be dealing with parts. Okay, how many times will 14 go into 77? Okay, if we estimate here, 14 times 5 is 70. I think that's going to be as close as we're going to get. So I'm going to write a 5 here. We're going to subtract 70 because 14 times 5 is 70. And that leaves me with 7 left over. Now this is where you're used to stopping and writing remainder. When we are dealing with decimals, we don't have remainders. We don't have 0.5 remainder 7. We keep on going, and this is where you annex a 0. So this is the tens place. What's in the hundreds place? Because it's after the decimal, we can put a 0 here without changing any values. So that's what we call annexing the 0. So we're going to annex that 0. And now we have 70 hundredths. How many times will 14 go into 70? Well, we've already done that. We know it's 5 times. So 5 times 14 is 70. So I'm going to minus 70 again. Now, see how I've ended with 0? That's when I know that I can be done. If I had another number, I'd annex another 0 and keep on going. Okay, we talked about how checking our answers. We just multiply these together and see if we get this number. And you guys know how to do that for space and time. I'm not going to do that in your math journal, but make sure to know that if you want to check your answers, you just multiply your quotient and your divisor to see if you can get your dividend. Okay, let's move over. Let's try another example. Okay, I want you to do 6.74. We're going to divide that by 3. Okay, how many times will 3 go into 6? 2 times, so I'm going to write a 2 here. 2 times 6 is 6, so minus 6. Notice how I'm keeping my place values lined up. That gives me 0. Just like I would in normal division, I go to the next place. But in my answer, I've got to make sure that I don't forget my decimal point. If there's a decimal point here, it needs to line up here. I'm done with my whole units. Now I'm moving to my tenths. How many times will 3 go into 7 tenths? 2 times. So minus 6 gives me 1. Move on to the hundredths place. How many times will 3 go into 14? I'd be 4 times. 3 times 4 is 12. So minus 12. And that gives me 2. Okay, I'm not going to do remainder here. This is where, because it's a decimal number, I want to keep going. So I'm going to annex a 0 in the thousandths place. Keep everything lined up. Now, how many times will 4 go into 20? Or, sorry, 3 go into 20. That'd be 6 times. So minus 18 gives me 2. Okay, I'm going to annex another 0. Bring that down. Now, how many times will 3 go into 20? Again, I get 6. I'm going to minus 18, but I'm going to end up with the same thing. So see how I have a 20 here, and I have a 20 here. So if I minus 18 again, I'm going to have another 20, and another 20, and another 20, and another 20. So this is what we call a repeating decimal. So the part that repeats, instead of showing that division over and over and over and over again, when we can see that final pattern of it repeating, and we know it's not going to end, we write this as a repeating decimal. So a repeating decimal looks like this. You write the original number, so 2, 2, 4, and then when it starts repeating, you write the part that repeats, but you draw a line over the top. That tells me that the 6 is going to go on and on and on and on and on forever, but I don't have to write it forever. So this is our final answer. Okay, that would be a repeating decimal. Okay, now I'm going to ask you to turn a fraction into a decimal. Now, how do you do that? Okay, a fraction is just a division problem we didn't want to finish. So if I give you the fraction, let's try 13 over 20. That means 13 is being divided by 20. Now, first of all, you know that this fraction is less than 1. So what does that tell us about our decimal? It means it's going to be 0 point something because I have 0 wholes. This is not enough to make a whole unit. If the top is bigger than the bottom, then yes, I will if it's improper. But here, this decimal is going to be smaller than 1, so it's going to have a 0 in the ones place. But how do I turn this into a decimal? I turn this into a division problem I can easily do. So I'm going to put 13 inside the box. Now, don't let it confuse you that you're putting the smaller number inside the box. We can divide by bigger numbers. So we're going to end up dividing that by 20. So 20 goes into 13 how many times? Okay, we already discussed it won't go into 1, and it won't go into 3, 13. This is how we know our decimal is going to be smaller than 1. Now with that, where's the decimal on the 13? It's right here at the end. It's right there at the end. So we're going to annex a 0. 13.0 is the same as 13. So if we do that, now 20 will go into 130 how many times? Well, let's think of our 2 times tables. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 will be the closest. So I'm going to put a 6 here. 6 times 20 is 120. And that leaves us with 10. Okay, annex another 0. We're just moving into the hundreds place. How many times will 20 go into 100? 5 times. So 5 times 20 is 100 minus 100. And I get 0. Okay, since I got 0 here and I have no other numbers besides 0 to work with, I know that I'm done. So 13/20 is the same as 0.65 or 65 hundredths. So that's how you turn a decimal or a fraction into a decimal. Okay, make sure you take nice notes, and we'll see you tomorrow.